So Art Online Fractured Daydream's third DLC, Moonlit Night Fragment, was a much better experience than I was anticipating. I was genuinely scared we'd get another Sachi dies but we revive her kind of story, same as Hollow Fragment, Fatal Bullet and the like, while expecting Philia to be the butt of the joke every single time that she had kinda sorta devolved into over time since her only meaningful appearance in her debut game, Hollow Fragment. Well, I'm happy Fractured Daydream did not go the route I feared with the two, and in fact, I'm very happy, I'm thrilled with how they treated Philia especially. My review has to start with quite the massive blunder by Bandai Namco as a whole. It is precisely the reason why this review is coming out so late on June 6 or 7 I believe. To put it briefly, Bandai Namco Europe failed to set up the character pass that included this DLC and the next correctly on PlayStation, which led to the PlayStation players who had pre-ordered the digital content not being able to actually receive it. And no, we're not talking about a day or two here, we are talking about 22 full days, over 3 full weeks, or in words that's relevant to Bandai Namco here, 16 business days. I contacted Bandai Namco Germany about the issue, made a follow-up a week after, and they only responded to me in over 2 weeks, and well, I appreciate the response. That was kinda bad response time for a continent-wide undelivered product, and they had no meaningful information to share, to provide to me, as if they were not even aware of the circumstances that were happening, thanking me for the report and escalating it to the appropriate department, assuming Europe headquarters. I contacted Bandai Namco US at the exact same time when the issues occurred, and I appreciate their response arrived in 5 days, or rather 3 business days, stating they had confirmed this was isolated to EU, it was an EU specific problem, and that their hands were therefore tied in the US, aside from, forwarding the report to the EU branch of course. However, Bandai Namco US are also the team who are running the SAO Games global accounts on Twitter and Facebook, which is exactly why I kinda sorta pleaded as much as I professionally could at that point that they at least post something about the fact that they are investigating, since, they were acting as the global account. Sadly, I have received no response on this suggestion, nor have they ever publicly acknowledged the issue in any way, shape or form, whether the US or the Europe. To nobody's surprise, all of their posts afterwards were slammed by angry players who felt they were pickpocketed and remained unacknowledged for the entire 3-week duration, creating an extremely negative sentiment around their brand. They must have their reasons for not saying anything, but looking from the outside, what a disaster and stain on their image. Meanwhile, Bandai Namco EU support, not one of the community team members I was in contact with, that the responsibility does not quite fall upon, the actual customer support team who should have been on top of the issue, assured me that it was a PlayStation problem and that I should contact Sony, despite the fact that it was Sony who was telling people to sort it out with the publisher, throwing everyone into this endless loop going between Sony and Bandai Namco constantly. Only after I told Sony that Bandai Namco EU support refused to help me with this matter, holding them, Sony, as the responsible party, was I offered a refund option. However, they have managed to sort things out before the painful refunding process was completed. The refunding process at Sony is absolutely horrible and it takes ages. Overall, this has been a very disastrous experience all around, and I will stress this very much. It has been a very memorable experience at that. A complete collapse of communication that caused the game to practically die in player memory at a time where it should have had a nice uptick in popularity. It's a DLC release where a company in different branches refused to publicly acknowledge that they took money from people and could not deliver a product, a digital product, for over 3 weeks without taking accountability. Your average player does not care whether it was Bandai Namco's or Sony's fault here. All they know is that Bandai Namco kindly told them to go away and sort it out at Sony's doorstep, and Sony kept claiming it was Bandai Namco's problem instead. This was unacceptable by any reasonable measure from the player side. The failure to address any of it or to inform your paid customers It was highly negligent at best. The continued attempts at advertising rather than acknowledging, throughout the entire period, understandably only led to angry people simply asking to be informed as the obvious outcome of feeling disregarded under every single one of your good intended posts. It was not something I ever expected to live through from a company on the top ranks of the industry. Where it was all going was visible from a mile away, but I'm glad I was able to learn from mistakes that are not mine. That is the rule number one of life: learn from others' mistakes. So, if I was in that position, I'd strongly vote against remaining silent to the issues, as I have basically pleaded them to inform players as a third party as all of this transpired. As I said, I have no inside information, I know nothing about their operations, I don't know how fragmented their individual HQs are, maybe there were reasons to stay silent, who knows, but looking from the outside, as part of the community, as one of the players who was affected, I personally do not see a single good reason to tarnish the trust of your community like this. Go through multiple layers of communication, get someone at the EU HQ on the comms and have them inform you, even if the result is a flat "we're aware of the issues and are investigating" in a simple single tweet. And I have been saying this for a while, nobody really cares whether the SAO Games is run from the US, whether you wanted it or not. English is the global language and you are thus the global account people are looking towards. If an entire continent has a product delivery issue, you acknowledge and reassure people that you are at least investigating, we're at that point, at least investigating. No other way to go about it, and I'll promote myself a bit bluntly here. You know me semi-professionally, specifically the US, EU, Germany, and even Japan as far as I know. You got all my info that you need. I continue to share my willingness to assist you wherever and however is more convenient for you. But all of that brings us to today. Well, the time this video releases at least, June 7th. Since Bandai Namco ignored the players for 16 business days, I decided to ignore Fractured Daydream for 16 business days myself, and that boycott has finally ended. So, Moonlit Night Fragment DLC, how is it? I am positively surprised on a surface level at the very least, but equally let down in hindsight. And no, that is not some clickbait, watch till the end to find out. I already spent 2 pages on the release disaster, so I'll get to it immediately, I'm not gonna waste your time. I think the characters were handled very well in this DLC. This is the first time in a long while that Philia acted as a likable presence rather than the butt of a joke. This is the first time any SAO game decided to do something other than Sachi is destined to die, we must save her shtick that they always did. There are super clever callbacks that only previous SAO game players or even only SAO light novel readers can catch. Even the day after gets a direct reference here. However, on the flip side of things, I don't know what I expect from an hour-long DLC at this point, but the structure was basically a long fetch quest. Well, the moments where the individual stuff, the characters' portrayals, they were great in my opinion. The overall plot was incredibly flat. It's kinda becoming clear that there's not much you can do in an hour, but the entire DLC was get out of the log cabin and collect this and that. A good narrative should be capable of hiding the fact that all missions are go from point A to B and defeat a group of enemies, and this wasn't it. The group, consisting of Kirito, Asuna, Shinon, Shirika, Strea, Yuki and Neige, receive a distress signal from the White Frontier from GGO from Fatal Bullets DLC 4. They never specifically say it's the White Frontier. I don't think anyone in the game knows, or rather from my point of view, at least I assume it is the White Frontier because the music used is a direct cover of that track. SAO video game soundtrack previews up on my channel, go give them a listen by clicking the clicky thing on the top right. And yeah, White Frontier is a proper, or rather at least decent open zone map in terms of size. We can't quite get a good sense of its size as it's only accessible in the story missions that have invisible walls placed around to keep you in specific places, so you can never explore it fully, but it feels about the size of those common maps in co-op quests where all teams slowly come together, It is not quite the size of a free quest map, though I imagine they'll do something with it in the upcoming seasons. When we arrive in White Frontier though, the snow picks up and group gets separated. This acts as an excuse to keep Kirito away from Sachi until much later, pretty much the end of the DLC, with him getting stranded elsewhere with Shinon and Shirika, and this is our team comedic relief. Has nice moments here and there, but that's all they provide until the final moments of this DLC. The other group, led by Asuna, come across the source of the distress signal, which turns out to be Philia. Good call on the writers here. They save a lot of time by bringing Strea along, as unlike our main characters, Philia, much like Strea, are pulled from the end of last collection, the Gameverse, so they just wave off the confusion with Strea explaining the gist of it quickly off screen. Philia adapts quickly, rather too quickly, but I'll give them credit. The game gives a good excuse that she was once stuck in the hollow area, so she's used to weird circumstances. Again, good, acceptable, quick introduction. Her personality is a lot more front and center as well, so you get to learn about Philia through this natural interactions that portrays her personality well. Shortly after, Asuna and Yuki come across Sachi down in the snow and bring her to a nearby cabin. Asuna intuitively realizes who this person is because, well done, the writers have read the Day After side story where Sachi literally showed herself and spoke to Asuna as a vague memory fragment. However, Neige states that she has memories missing, so Philia takes the lead here in search of Sachi's memory fragments that may just be around, since she came across some shiny things as she was scouting the area before. Well done, treasure hunter, you using your skills to get story progression rather than being laughed at by finding some boar underwear. This is not the bumbling treasure-brained Philia who became a millionaire via crypto schemes as last collection would lead you to believe. This is a proper skillful treasure hunter with a passion for exploration while maintaining her believable humanity, let's say. When back at the cabin, Neige works her system magic and wakes Sachi up with the memories, although a final fragment there is missing. So we get a quick scene of each character mentioning a memory or two that they spent with Kirito, as Sachi's missing memory is related to him, in an attempt to, get her gears rolling to no avail, but it's a nice nostalgic scene, hearing about him from these different perspectives. Back with Kirito's group, Shirika randomly chases a black cat in the snowstorm because obviously that's what you do when you need some story to have. I meant that's what you do in the middle of a blizzard. You willingly separate from the group without even saying a word and have them chase after you. First thing I do when the skiing season begins. No, really, I love doing that. Either way, going through a Galaxia gate, Shirika obtains a memory fragment from the cat while also being plunged into the clutches of Kagachi the Samurai Lord, our new boss of the season. Asuna's group alongside Sachi comes in, and this time it's Sachi who rushes in with resolve to protect Kirito. Sadly, while I enjoy not having Sachi die yet again for once, she stays alive properly and comes in to save Kirito, the Sachi DLC has a surprisingly lacking amount of Sachi and Kirito screen time, which also comes with the added bonus of having absolutely no Philia and Kirito screen time, because obviously the little time they spent in the full group together, it's Sachi who takes priority. All in all, good handling of lore and characters, but from what I can say from all 3 DLCs so far, the 1-hour story is simply ending up extremely unsatisfactory. No matter how well you can weave your characters and lore, it simply is not enough time to work with the material beyond the simplest of setups, which is kinda sorta a shame. I do not expect this to change with DLC 4, which should more or less be wrapping up development around now for a late July 25-ish release, but I hope with Year 2, where I still expect a full-blown yearly expansion, they can internally structure things to be more ambitious and tune the seasonal DLCs to have enough runtime to tell a meaningful story rather than a glorified fetch quest, which is what most of these have felt so far. Because they really did their homework well this time around with the characters, they just didn't have the screen time to do anything other than just referencing things. For DLC 5, not the yearly expansion I'm expecting, I hope for a 2-hour story at least, similar to Illustration Licorice's DLCs, a proper setup, an engaging narrative hook, and a plot where something is actually happening. But credit where credit is due, this time we also have a mini, well, two actually, onsen talk side stories. They are neat. A little funny, Gameverse-like misunderstanding that leads to a wholesome moment with the entire group. For side stories, I don't mind Gameverse vibes all that much, as long as it's not going the extreme sexual scenes, which it doesn't here, gladly. That's all I have to say on the side story, probably less costly than main campaign stuff as well, so I'll gladly have such mini stories to pad the value of DLCs a bit. But again, I still do expect a bit more from the main DLC story, starting with DLC 5, that I expect to come around late October, sticking to our established calendar, and a proper main campaign production with actual animated cutscenes for the yearly expansion that... well, I really think we'll have a yearly expansion. I hope, I pray, such games require it to rekindle their player base. Seasonal DLCs alone do not quite cut it. It's gonna be bad news if we don't get one, as the game will struggle a lot maintaining players without a large yearly influx from one such huge expansion. The new map review. I talked about the White Frontier already. I'm gonna keep calling it White Frontier. It's the soundtrack, come on. It feels really fresh as a new open zone map, but it is hard to gauge its actual scale. As I said, it felt like a common map in co-op quests where all 5 teams come together, so much smaller than a free quest map at the moment, but we haven't been able to explore it without the story barrier since the map is otherwise not available at the moment. Something will probably be done with it in future season content editions. Again, I hope. This time around we have no new dungeon, it's the ordinal scale stage that's been reused here, however the boss is the newly introduced Kagachi the Samurai Lord. I'll be honest, it is quite the punishing boss compared to the bars set by your average co-op quest bosses. I think it's a good boss. It moves around a lot, it has fast attacks, it requires you to be on your toes all the time. However, if I may, I feel like such mobile bosses do require having at least a little more DPS periods. I think Kagachi is definitely a step in the right direction to make more engaging bosses for players. Now maybe some added mechanic that a handful of players can achieve to, in quotes, parry bosses' attacks. Maybe that gives 2-3 seconds of safe DPS periods, for example, because the boss just zaps around constantly. It leads to these frustrating keep chasing the boss moments, and the slashing game is only really satisfying when you get to slash things, which I feel Kagachi lacks slightly. And providing a mini parry mechanic like that I mentioned, for example 5 players in the lobby successfully perfect parrying attack to trigger it, would also make the boss a lot more of an engaging endeavor rather than just keep evading and chase it around. But again, definitely on the right track here, I wanna see more of this. Last but not least, character reviews, as in Philia and Sachi's actual gameplay. Let's start with Sachi. I have less to say about her and more to say on Philia. Sachi is a support character with healing on her unique ability rather than a skill or her ultimate. You basically hold down the unique ability and Sachi plops her spear to the ground, casting a healing effect as long as you keep it holding. It heals in quite small bursts, but it ticks very fast, so it's quite potent as a whole. But it'll be a bit content dependent here since it's a risk and reward healing. Luckily, most current content has a lot of safe spots that allows you to plop your spear without worrying about getting hit, but if there are too many regular mobs around with area of effect abilities or bosses that really love moving around, you may want to reconsider using it. It's not like Leafa's healing where it's cast once and regen passively. You really gotta hold it down to get a meaningful healing out of it. Sadly, her attacks are a little too slow for my enjoyment. That's a me problem, I admit that wholeheartedly. They are beautifully animated otherwise and have a decent reach for those who enjoy the fighting style. My only real problem, objective problem, that is not a me problem thing, is her lunge/pierce attack, where I feel like the lunge distance is very unpredictable and is often just broken when it's used as a switch action. Most characters lunge the entire field for their switch action, whereas Sachi just does a minimal lunge. I expect it to be fixed at some point, clearly not intended. Otherwise, she has a multi-thrust attack, which is my favorite, and a thrust spin mini area attack thing which also casts down a field effect that decreases the skill cooldown of all characters standing in it, so a nice offensive boost overall. Her ultimate is an offensive one, it's a straight out attack with a flurry of thrusts, no special effects attached. While I do not enjoy the slow style Sachi has and the rolling dodge she has, which I find unreliable on all characters who roll, rather than sidestep, I've heard people enjoying her a lot, seen plenty of times that her healing is overpowered and the like, so you may just love Sachi as a playable character. My real favorite, however, is Philia. A lot of care went into her animations and it is so very clear even at a glance. She has a double jump much like Argo, however she does this smooth acrobatic flick on her second jump which I absolutely adore. Her ultimate, Hollow Trick, a direct reference to Hollow Fragment / Hollow Area, where she summons her Hollow Copy, goes for a flurry of attacks which covers a pretty decent AoE range mind you, and finishes it off with this cute high five with her Hollow Double. Her skills are nothing out of the ordinary really. She has a small AoE spinny slash, a combo that ends in a launching slash, and a quick large combo attack. But the real treat with her is her unique ability, Treasure Boost. Every mod you get during gameplay, the character perks you get from chests or high tier enemies, you can consume with Philia to earn permanent benefits that include attack, damage mitigation, passive HP recovery, and movement speed. The tooltip states the mod you consume determines the benefits you get, but from my experience it just prioritizes certain bonuses and you can obtain all of them in the end regardless of which mod types you consume. You have these 4 rectangles on your status bar, so let's say you consume a movement speed mod that has that treasure icon. That just means the treasure rectangle will start filling first, so you'll receive the movement speed boost early. If your movement speed rectangle has already filled up completely, you can still consume movement speed perks. It will continue to fill the other rectangles without any issues, allowing you to obtain the other bonuses just fine. I mean, it's no secret, I prefer the agile combat characters, so I'm biased in loving Philia more than Sachi here, but Philia pretty much dethroned Argo as my favorite character here. Her attacks feel a lot more fluid, which Argo was already decent at. She has a much nicer animated double jump, and yes, I am really in love with that double jump animation. And her ultimate ability just hits that sweet nostalgia spot as well as the cool spot that I just get a smile every time I use it. The mod consumability just feels very satisfying game to game. Filling bars during the game allows my ape brain to enjoy progress because it fills bars or rectangles in this case. I really dig it. I think they did a great job with Philia here. But yeah, that is all I got. I want to once again say that the DLCs feel a little overpriced for what they offer. A 1-hour campaign that does not particularly impress, featuring not a single cutscene. The comedic effects here and there are neat, like the funny slide movements that they used back in DLC 2 as well, but otherwise it feels like a very budget production quality that only exists to justify having a $15 price tag on what is essentially a character pack here. Like, seriously, just having a 30-second in-engine animated scene for the arrivals of the new characters and maybe the climax moment, it would really go a long way shaking off that budget feeling. Even something like Pito's intro animation being used in story back in DLC 2, it was a nice touch that gave some life to the presentation. 2D visual novel sprites can get away with how static they are thanks to the style, but in 3D, the presentation ends up feeling way too cheap. Same issue as Fatal Bullet, where characters are just standing in a circle and talking with no scene that stands out. Again, just simple 30-second cutscenes for the first appearance of a DLC character. I think that goes a long way in making that feel more lively. Also, I still stand by my previous suggestion from DLC 2. I think offering a single SAO ticket for S ranking all DLC missions in a given DLC would provide some additional perceived value for players overall, and getting that one ticket per 3 months, it really does not affect your bottom line. Once again, it's a shame what happened with the DLC launch in Europe. It's a shame that you decide to stay silent, never acknowledging it, leaving players in the dark, getting really angry responses that kind of made me feel sad for you guys as well for being stuck in that position. I really do hope it never happens again, but given the experience and given previously reported issues usually taking 2-3 times to be repeated in order to get fixed, like both DLC 1 and 2 having multiple different titles in the game, a sign of negligent branding at some point in the chain, and disconnected translation processes with DLC text misinterpreting what the DLC offers and actually false advertising the weapon contents despite having been directly reported previously, etc. It's probably fixed, but I cannot fully trust that DLC 4 with Mito and Alice won't have the same problems or some other problem with future DLCs causing players to not being able to access the DLC for over 3 weeks for 16 business days. Bandai Namco community teams all around the globe, every single one of you, please communicate with players. When you don't communicate, people actually do get angry more than they would get otherwise. And on the flip side, players, I recommend you do not pre-order the DLCs or character passes and simply wait until the day they release and the community confirms that they are safe to access in this case. I'll be blunt, I did feel like shit, you know, working hard to promote the DLC on my own terms just out of my passion for the game and the community, only for it to be broken not just for me but for an entire continent. I felt secondhand embarrassment and a responsibility to try finding a solution through you from 3 different branches to no avail, as well as Sony, and it was unacceptable that it was over 3 weeks of complete silence and refusal to help or publicly acknowledge, and in my opinion it's also unacceptable towards Bandai Namco as a brand to cause such a negative reception on your product by remaining silent and having every single post attempt on your socials be spammed by angry paying customers expecting any communication rather than complete silence. That's all really from my side. You know, it's all in good faith to not have problems in the future to get things reported and fixed in a timely manner. We all have our responsibilities somewhere in the chain. Mine as a third party are to the players to be their public voice to get them heard, to Bandai Namco as the publisher for all the tasks that revolve around actually publishing and getting those feedback back to wherever it belongs, and to Dimps of course for the game itself, gameplay, story, how it feels and all those kinds of stuff, to be honest with my feedback towards that improvement goals. So thank you very much for watching. Whether you're a player, Bandai Namco or Dimps, I hope you found the review and feedback helpful. Until next time, stay cool.